A leading contender for the leadership of UKIP is in hospital after an altercation at a meeting of his party's MEPs. Stephen Woolfe is in a serious condition in hospital after collapsing in the European Parliament building in Strasbourg. We'll be getting the latest from Brussels and Westminster. Also this lunchtime, a landmark ruling on fracking as the government gives the go-ahead to the most controversial technique of extracting shale gas. We will not accept another Rwanda or Srebrenica. And also the devastation left by Hurricane Matthew. And a warning from the UN that we will not accept another Rwanda or Srebrenica over the situation in the Syrian city of Aleppo. Ploughing a lonely furrow no more is the driverless tractor, the future of farming.
In the south, deadline day in the Southern Rail dispute, crucial talks while dozens of guards face the threat of the sack. And how free school meals are unexpectedly depriving some schools of thousands of pounds extra income.
Good afternoon and welcome to the BBC News at 1. The UKIP MEP, Stephen Woolfe, has been taken to hospital after what's been described as an altercation at a party meeting in Strasbourg this morning. He's said to be in a serious condition. Yesterday, he announced he'd be standing for the leadership of UKIP after Diane James resigned unexpectedly. In a moment, we'll speak to our political correspondent, Alex Forsyth. But first, let's go to Brussels. Damian Grammaticus is there. What's happened?
Well, what we know, Simon, is that this morning in the European Parliament, we've been told from sources there that Mr. Woolfe collapsed inside the Parliament complex, not in the chamber itself. We understand it may have been just outside, so close to the chamber. He was immediately attended to by ushers from the Parliament, security staff there. They took him to a room in the Parliament where there are medical facilities, and he was then subsequently taken to hospital in Strasbourg, where he is receiving treatment. Now, what has been reported is a statement from Nigel Farage, who said that there was an altercation that took place during a meeting of UKIP MEPs in the Parliament this morning, and that Stephen Woolfe subsequently collapsed. He says, Mr. Farage says that Stephen Woolfe's condition is serious, and there have been some other reports that in that meeting it was quite heated and that something may have taken place there. But as we understand it, Mr. Woolfe receiving treatment but in a serious condition.
Damien, thank you. Let's go to Alex Forsyth in Westminster. This happening for a party that only yesterday was being described as in turmoil.
That's right. It's been a very tumultuous time for UKIP over the course of the last few months, even perhaps the last year. We had the unexpected resignation of its newly appointed leader, Diane James, on Tuesday. Yesterday, there was confirmation of a new leadership race, and Stephen Woolfe was the first to declare himself as a candidate. Only yesterday he was doing media appearances explaining why he thought he would be the best person to lead UKIP. Stephen Woolfe is a prominent figure in the party. He's their immigration spokesman. He's an MEP in the European Parliament in Brussels and Strasbourg for the North West, and he is a popular figure among many, thought to be the party's best hope for its next leader. And so this news this morning that there had been some sort of altercation at a meeting of UKIP MEPs came very much as a surprise. As you might imagine, even among the possible leadership rivals, there is unanimous well wishes for Stephen Woolfe as this situation develops. People tweeting on social media, emailing, texting their best wishes to him. There has been somewhat of a pause in, of course, this leadership campaign while people focus on Stephen Woolfe as we try to establish the severity of the situation. As Damien said, what we know at the moment is that his condition is said to be serious. Raheem Kassam, the only other person to have declared himself to be a candidate in the leadership race, a former advisor to Nigel Farage, said out of respect for what has happened there will be a pause. This really another very difficult episode in what has been a very tumultuous time for the party over the course of the last few months.
Alex Forsyth, thank you very much, and Damian Grammaticus in Brussels, thank you. The government has approved fracking for shale gas at one site in Lancashire, but has asked for more information on another. It means for the first time UK shale rock will be fracked horizontally, which is expected to yield more gas, but protesters say it uses techniques that risk the environment because of the chemicals and pressure used. Lancashire County Council refused permission at both sites last year on grounds of noise and traffic impact, but the fracking firm Cuadrilla appealed. Our correspondent Daniel Bircher reports.
The energy company Cuadrilla believes that shale rocks under these fields hold vast quantities of gas. That's why it wants to drill exploratory wells at two sites. But it's run into opposition from residents, environmental campaigners and the local authority. In June last year, Lancashire County Council refused permission for drilling the wells. Cuadrilla appealed, and today the Community Secretary Sajid Javid said fracking could go ahead on one site and that he was minded to allow it at the second.
There's no further steps that the authority can take. I would be very surprised if some of the people who've objected to it don't take legal advice and don't ask for this decision to be judicially reviewed. It would be a great surprise. They can take it all the way up to the European Court if needs be. So this certainly isn't the end of this story.
The shale gas is almost 2 miles underground. Cuadrilla's plans for the exploratory wells involve drilling at first vertically, then horizontally. The process involves injecting water, sand and chemicals into the rocks at high pressure to release the gas trapped in tiny cracks. Those opposed are concerned about the impact on the immediate area, about the fracking process itself and about exploration for gas, when they argue there should be more focus on renewables.
I think it's clear that the government is trying to force fracking on a reluctant nation. They're trying to push it through at the local planning level, overturning democratic decisions by the local council, but they're also trying to push it through as part of their energy strategy, which makes no economic or environmental sense.
The Department of Communities and Local Government said in a statement the decisions follow extensive consideration of all the evidence, including an independent planning inspector's report and evidence submitted during a 2-week public inquiry. The industry says fracking will eventually provide jobs and a secure energy supply, and Cuadrilla insists work at the exploratory site will be safe and closely monitored.
I think this will be the most monitored site, certainly in oil and gas terms, that there ever has been in the UK. We'll be monitoring noise levels, water quality, air quality, ecology, lighting, etc. So there will be a lot of data available to people to demonstrate that this is being done in a safe and responsible way.
This is a decision about one firm's plans in one area, but it will now be looked at closely by other local authorities as they consider further applications for fracking. Daniel Bircher, BBC News.
Well, Judith Moritz is in Little Plumpton in Lancashire, and what's reaction there been?
Well, Simon, largely from local people here, it's been one of disappointment and anger, but that's on two fronts, at the decision itself, but also at the fact that it's been taken by central government. One campaign group here has said that the government has dismantled the democratic process. They've accused it of failing to listen to people's concerns. Another campaigner has said, where do you turn? We went to the parish council, we went to the borough council, we went to the county council. They all turned it down. Why isn't the government doing the same? And in fact, Lancashire County Council, which did turn down the applications for fracking in Lancashire, and this is one of the sites it looked at and rejected, that council this morning has said that local councillors in a council which has been democratically elected, that's the right body to take such a decision. But not everyone is against it. The North West Chamber of Commerce has welcomed the decision today and has said that there will be positive implications for investment and for jobs in the area, and that there's lots to be positive about. And it's not just in Lancashire here that there's going to be a reaction. It will be, watch this, around the country. A flurry of other planning applications now possible from other energy companies. What will we see here? Well, nothing in the short term, but come back to me at the end of next year. And this field behind me, although it's full of cows at the moment, you'll see a drilling rig of over 50 metres in height.
Judith Moritz, thank you very much. Forecasters say Hurricane Matthew, which is now pounding the Bahamas, has gained in strength. The governor of Florida is warning that the state could face catastrophic destruction if it makes a direct hit. Roads in the states of Florida, Georgia and North and South Carolina are clogged as millions heed warnings to flee inland. The hurricane has already hit Haiti, where at least 23 people have been killed. Richard Galpin reports.
Finally, 2 days after the hurricane hit Haiti, the scale of destruction can now be seen as emergency teams try to reach the areas in the south and west where people have lost everything. This was a town called Jérémie, the hurricane ripping roofs off houses and flattening others. People now forced to sleep and eat outside. Antoine Louis is a farmer. He says they've now lost all the food in their house. They have nothing to cook and they're starving. Medical facilities like this maternity hospital have also been damaged in the huge downpours of rain. Across this impoverished island, it's estimated 350,000 people now need help. After hitting Haiti, Hurricane Matthew has moved over Cuba and the Bahamas and now threatens the southern United States, with wind speeds picking up, potentially to more than 150 miles per hour. Here in Florida, as in Georgia and North and South Carolina, people are preparing for the worst, ensuring buildings are protected to withstand the full force of the hurricane. They've also been buying up emergency supplies, leaving some shops empty already. And the governor is appealing for people living in vulnerable areas to leave as quickly as possible.
Get out. Don't wait for an order. Get out now. You're going to see traffic pick up as more people take this seriously, and we go from voluntary to mandatory evacuations. So if you know you're going to evacuate, don't wait to evacuate. Get out now. It could be the decision between life and death.
Hundreds of thousands of people in the southern states are now on the move, with forecasters predicting the hurricane will reach eastern Florida tonight. Richard Galpin, BBC News.
The United Nations Special Envoy for Syria says the city of Aleppo will be destroyed by Christmas and thousands more civilians will die if the conflict between rebels and government forces continues. Our diplomatic correspondent James Landale is with me. It's a deeply distressing assessment that the UN have made.
Yes, it is. I mean, what Staffan de Mistura, the UN envoy, said was that Aleppo is now in what he called emergency mode. In the last couple of weeks alone, 376 people killed, 1,600 injured, and he said that's just going to get worse. And if things do not change, then by Christmas and other festivities in 2.5 months' time, he said the city will be completely destroyed. And if, as a result, because of the fact that the fighting is intensified and the Russians and the Americans aren't talking to each other, he came up with another appeal. He appealed to the al-Nusra, the al-Qaeda-linked fighters in Aleppo. He said there are about 900 of them. He said leave. He'll travel with them on a route outside of Aleppo if possible, because you can't risk the 275,000 people just because of those fighters. And he appealed again to the Russians. Let these fighters leave in peace. Let the local administration, the United Nations, start running eastern Aleppo. This is the last throw of the dice from an organisation that is deeply troubled, that has seemed to fail on this because of the divisions that have existed within the United Nations Security Council. And that's going to be the new task for the new boss, the new Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres. He will be confirmed today as the Security Council's unanimous choice. And his task is twofold. One is just to get some kind of stability, some kind of policy that gets some kind of grip of the situation in Syria in terms of reducing the fighting, but also trying to deal with the migration crisis that has been sparked in part by that conflict. So a huge inbox for this new head of the UN.
James, thank you very much. James Landau. A 41-year-old man who's accused of murdering 4 young men he met online went to prison for lying about the first death, the court has heard. Stephen Port is charged with drugging and murdering 4 young men that he'd met on gay social networking sites. He's also accused of rape and sexual assault against other men. He denies all the charges. Our Home Affairs correspondent Daniel Sanford is at the Old Bailey for us. Daniel.
Yes, Simon, the prosecution has been painting a picture of sex, lies and drug rape, suggesting to the jury that again and again Stephen Port had killed and then covered up his crime. At one point he was even sent to prison for lying about the first death, but came out to kill again.
Anthony Walgate, a 23-year-old fashion student and the first of 4 people Stephen Port is accused of killing. He died in Port's flat in Barking, having prophetically given a friend details of who he was meeting. "In case I get killed," he said. The prosecution say Port dragged his lifeless body outside the flat and then called an ambulance. Stephen Port lied to the police about the fact that Anthony Walgate had spent the night in his flat, but later admitted it and spent more than 2 months in prison for perverting the course of justice. Anthony Walgate had died from poisoning by GHB, which is sometimes used as a date rape drug. Before meeting Anthony Walgate, Port had done an internet search using the words "boys being drug raped." 2 months after Anthony Walgate's death, a second body turned up in a churchyard 500 metres away. It was Gabriel Kavari, a 22-year-old from Slovakia, and he too had died from poisoning by GHB and mephedrone. The prosecution say Stephen Port, who is a chef, mounted an elaborate cover-up, posing on the internet as a man called John Luck to lie to a friend of Gabriel Kavari about what happened, and much later told a pack of lies to the police about it too. And it didn't end there. Extraordinarily, Barbara Denham, the dog walker who'd found Gabriel Kavari's body, filmed here at a later date, discovered another body 4 weeks afterwards in the same churchyard. It was Daniel Whitworth, clasped in his hand a suicide note, which much later Stephen Port admitted writing.
The fourth young man to die after meeting Stephen Port was Jack Taylor. His death came after Stephen Port's prison sentence for perverting the course of justice, and the jury should hear more details of that this afternoon. Simon.
Daniel Sanford, thank you. It's just after 1:15. Our top story this lunchtime. A leading contender for the leadership of UKIP is in hospital in a serious condition after an altercation at a meeting of his party's MEPs. Also coming up.
Look, Bar, no hands. Automated tractors have finally arrived, and there's talk of a revolution in agriculture.
In South Today, we'll have a full weather forecast. Also, how 2 new Oxford buildings have made the shortlist for the biggest prize in architecture. Judging's tonight. And Basingstoke girls rugby team go from strength to strength as numbers playing the game continue to increase.
Independent research seen by the BBC suggests that Heathrow Airport could build a third runway without breaking European pollution laws. The study, which was led by Cambridge University, comes as the government is due to announce in the coming weeks whether it wants to expand Heathrow or Gatwick, and the impact on the environment will be a major factor. Our transport correspondent Richard Westcott reports.
Pollution's one of the key reasons people oppose a bigger Heathrow. The air near the airport already breaks EU law in some places, and campaigners fear a new runway will just make it worse. But this new research, which was funded by the impartial Natural Environment Research Council and has no formal link to the airport or the government, suggests that expansion won't mean breaking official European health laws.
So this is one of the units that we've built for the Heathrow study. Inside you can see the sensors, which are measuring both the particles and some of the pollutant gases. We expect there to be a marginal increase in the amount of nitrogen dioxide coming from the airport itself. But that will be against a background of a very much reduced nitrogen dioxide from the other general traffic flow because of the transition to Euro 6 engines, electrification of the fleet.
Critically, this study says it all comes down to cars, lorries and buses, not aeroplanes, because that is where the bulk of the poisonous nitrogen dioxide gas comes from around Heathrow. It predicts that by 2030, when a runway could be built, vehicle engines will be so much cleaner they'll actually cut pollution. Opponents call it wishful thinking.
We should be very cautious about research anticipating, dramatic improvements in vehicle efficiency. We've been here before. The last time we had a government supportive of Heathrow expansion, the models told us everything would be sorted by now. It hasn't come to pass.
No ifs, no buts, and no new runway.
After years of sweeping the decision under the carpet, ministers are about to announce whether to enlarge Heathrow or Gatwick. Whichever scheme they pick, opponents won't take it lying down. Richard Westcott, BBC News.
Pauline Kafiki, the nurse who contracted Ebola in Sierra Leone 2 years ago, has been taken to hospital in Glasgow under police escort. It's the 4th time she's been hospitalised since her return to the UK. The Queen Elizabeth University Hospital says she's having routine monitoring. People who are caught carrying knives should be given longer jail sentences, according to the Sentencing Council for England and Wales. They also want people who pose with knives on social media or post films of attacks to face harsher sentences. Our Home Affairs correspondent Dominic Casciani reports.
Free of a gang lifestyle, this is Sefton Henry. Once a member of the Woolwich Boys network in South London, knives and the threat of them were part of daily life. Jailed 7 times and now straight, he has a message for anyone thinking of carrying a blade.
Mostly the reason is because of they're afraid. So someone carries a knife because they're afraid. If a kid came to me and he was saying that he was going to carry a knife, I would tell him that it's not the way. It's definitely not the way. The only thing that's going to happen is he's going to end up in prison, or he's going to end up hurt or even dead.
Now the Sentencing Council for England and Wales says jail terms for knife offences must reflect public concern. Its new guidelines propose longer sentences for adults caught with a knife. The worst offenders could be jailed for up to 2.5 years. The guidelines aim to ensure judges sentence all offenders in a similar way.
What the guidelines will ensure is that there's consistency of sentencing across the Magistrates' Court through to the Crown Court, that there's consistency of sentencing for adults and for youths, because all of the guidelines bring together all sentencing practice and legislation under one document.
Police chiefs are concerned that knife crime has risen, with hotspots in London, Manchester and Birmingham. Gangs aren't behind all these crimes, but the council says young people will get tougher sentences if they're in one, or post videos of their attacks on social media.
The Sentencing Council wants jail terms to properly reflect society's concerns about knife crime. But here's the problem. While the number of offenders going to prison has risen over the last decade, the number of people who are prepared to carry a knife has also recently gone up. Critics say many of those being caught are more scared of being attacked than the possibility of prison. Dominic Casciani, BBC News in Woolwich, South London.
Chances are the television you're watching right now has come from another part of the world, and not all the food you're having for lunch will be home-produced. We've perhaps become rather blasé about the impact of global trade, but the fact is it affects all of us and pretty much every day. Trade leaders are meeting in Washington to find ways to persuade us it's a good thing. But is it? Steph McGovern has been to Middlesbrough to find out.
Middlesbrough is a town in North Yorkshire which has seen a lot of change because of globalisation. For a long time, this place where I grew up was dominated by heavy industries like iron and steel making.
At its peak, 40,000 people were employed in the steel sector here on Teesside, but it's struggled as countries like China have been able to make steel more cheaply. This site was mothballed after decades in action, and thousands of jobs were lost.
It was a town that was built on the iron and steel industry, and that's been very good to us in terms of global trade over the past 150 years. But when you base an economy on a single industry, if you lose that industry, the economy does suffer, and that's the challenge for us.
It's a challenge that the port here says the area has risen to.
Teesport's one of the major ports in the UK. A vast array of products are handled. The chemical sector here is the largest in the UK. It's a big energy hub. We see oil coming off from the North Sea, and now we have a real thriving container business which employs thousands of people.
It's easy to think that Middlesbrough is a place that's all about heavy industry, but in the shadows of the old industrial landscape is a growing digital sector that's making its mark as a global player.
If you want to pop that on, close your eyes, slowly open your eyes.
This company uses virtual reality technology to help businesses solve real-life problems.
We have strived for the last 3.5 years to become an international company. We've made market visits out to Japan, to Brazil and to Singapore, and we've secured contracts in those territories.
So why Middlesbrough? Because you could be anywhere.
There's a really nice juxtaposition between the heavy industry of yesteryear, and then you've got about 15 years worth of investment in the digital and creative sectors. So what we've now got is the IT infrastructure to support all of these larger scale companies.
The good and the bad of globalisation are really apparent here. While some businesses thrive from their ability to trade from here with the rest of the world, For others, it's brought hardship as their industries can't keep up with global competition. For a place like Middlesbrough, it means working hard to have a competitive edge. Steph McGovern, BBC News, Middlesbrough.
Well, that report is part of our coverage across the BBC of our Unfair Trade Day. There's plenty more online at bbc.co.uk/business. A woman is taking legal action against an ambulance trust after it sent a private ambulance whose crew failed to identify that her husband was starting to have a heart attack. The East of England Ambulance Service NHS Trust uncovered a series of failures and has apologised to Kim Page for the death of her husband Gary. NHS spending on private ambulances for 999 calls in England has trebled in the last 4 years. Our legal correspondent Clive Coleman reports.
In February, Kim Page and her husband Gary were at home watching TV on the sofa when he began to feel pain in his chest. She dialed 111.
By then he was on his hands and knees with his elbows on the sofa talking to them.
A crew from a private ambulance company contracted to work for the East of England Ambulance Service arrived, led by emergency medical technician Lauren de la Haye.
Lauren de la Haye sat down next to Gary and said, like, what's the problem? And he said, I think it's my heart. She put the stethoscope on his chest and said, everything sounds fine.
But the heart trace taken by the crew, who then left, clearly showed evidence of heart problems. In the night, Gary remained uncomfortable and so went to sleep in a back bedroom.
He wouldn't wake up, so I started to punch him and then like trying to shake him, and couldn't wake him, so I got the phone and rang the 999 service.
But they couldn't save him?
They couldn't save him, no. No, he died here.
What makes his death even harder for his family to bear is that Gary Page was just minutes away from a specialist heart unit here at Basildon University Hospital when he fell ill. A report read at the inquest from the East of England Ambulance Service found Lauren de la Haye's incorrect analysis of Gary Page's ECG and presenting signs and symptoms was the root cause of his death. The coroner found serious failings of care. Lauren de la Haye didn't attend the inquest, but has told the BBC she denies failing Gary. The East of England Ambulance Service has apologised for providing Gary Page with insufficient care. It said the seriousness of Mr Page's condition was not recognised and further advice not sought. As a result of the case, the service has changed its procedures so that if a crew decides not to take a patient to hospital, it must first contact a clinical advice line.
I think the problem with some private ambulance crew is there's no register, and it's a lottery as to who will turn up to care for your loved one. They may not have the correct expertise, qualification or experience.
Kim Page is taking legal action over the death of her husband, but nothing can compensate her for his loss.
And now I've got to find a way of living without him. I don't want to.
Clive Coleman, BBC News.
You're watching BBC News. Driverless vehicles have entered a new field, and it's all thanks to a British-based company. The first fully integrated automated tractor is capable of operating anywhere in Britain, as Duncan Kennedy reports.
No hands, no problem. This is a tractor with a mind of its own. Capable of precision driving without a driver. I'm heading down this private road just for the ride. Well, it's only when you're up here that this thing feels more like a games console than a tractor cab. I'm not touching anything, yet we're weaving along down this road, and this 12-ton beast can position itself to within 1 inch of any object. With accuracy like that, hardly any land is wasted. In fact, the makers believe if they were used in Britain's existing fields, an extra 160,000 acres of land could be brought into production.
What we're looking at now is the next evolution in farming. We need to address this issue of growing more from less. And the only way to do that is going to be to drive forward efficiency in farming and with the use of things like autonomous vehicles.
It works by combining GPS with RTK. In English, that means a phone signal super upgraded by data from 110 location beacons. But this is what's coming next. an autonomous tractor straight out of Thunderbirds. It can go round objects and doesn't need to stop at night. The result, more food from the same land. For the average British farmer, that could mean an extra £9,000 a year. Yet some still feel we may be losing some precious human skills.
When you're cultivating, you learn how the fields react in different weathers, you know, where it's heavier or lighter, and whether you shouldn't be there.
Hands-free farming may mean fewer jobs and the loss of ancient skills. But in a world of surging populations, more crops from the same amount of land may now be the future of agriculture. Duncan Kennedy, BBC News in Hampshire.
Let's catch up with the weather forecast. Here is Louise Leah. Louise.
Thanks, Simon. Good afternoon. Perfect weather for the farmers over the last few weeks, but a distinctly autumnal feel to our weather at the moment, as depicted by this Weather Watchers picture. A lot of low grey cloud, and the leaves are starting to come down off the trees now. Today is actually National Poetry Day, so I thought I'd concentrate on the joys that autumn can bring, in the words of Eamon Duffy, with cascades of colour in the air. Tall trees are now bare, something perhaps to look forward to. There you go, there's your culture for Thursday afternoon. Let's get back to business with the weather. Why have we got this autumnal flavour to our weather? Well, an easterly wind is starting to move in from the near continent, and temperatures in Poland close to 7 degrees today. So as it moves across that cooler North Sea, it's dragging in more cloud and definitely a bit more of an autumnal nip in the air along that east coast. So it will stay rather cloudy here and temperatures a little more disappointing. There will be some sunshine through this afternoon, 12 to 16 degrees though the overall high. Through the night tonight we see more cloud coming in off the North Sea, and that cloud thick enough for the odd spot or two of drizzle. Bit of a nuisance really overnight. Perhaps we keep some clearer skies into the far north, into Scotland, and here under the sheltered glens we could have a touch of light frost. But that's where we'll start off with some sunshine first thing tomorrow morning. Elsewhere the cloud, the damp drizzly feel will start to break up as we go into the afternoon, but there's a greater risk tomorrow perhaps of seeing more showers dotted around. Sheltered western areas will see the best of the sunshine, but look at the temperatures, only around 12, 13 degrees. Along the North Sea coast we keep the risk perhaps of the cloud thick enough and an isolated shower from time to time. Almost anywhere could see the odd spot or two of light rain, but with some sunshine. It's not all doom and gloom out there, but temperatures struggling, 12 to 16 degrees for many of us. Bit of a shock to the system in comparison to the weeks gone by. Saturday again, largely fine and dry. Again, that easterly breeze. So if you're on exposed North Sea coast, it's going to feel pretty chilly. And as we move into Sunday, we run the risk of more showers across East Anglia and the southeast corner, chasing the cloud further west. So we're stuck in a rut at the moment, and we need something to shift the weather pattern across the UK. And actually, it may well come through Hurricane Matthew, which, as we've heard, moving towards the Bahamas and the islands of Turks and Caicos. It looks likely to track close towards the east coast of Florida and then shift its momentum further north and west. And if that happens, it could kickstart a different story across the UK. Back to you.
Louise, thank you very much. A reminder of our top story this lunchtime. The leading contender for the leadership of UKIP, Stephen Woolfe, is in hospital after an altercation at a meeting of his party's MEPs. That's all from us now on BBC One. It's time for the news where you are. From me, good afternoon.